Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Morning Shot.
Welcome to Morning Shot. Singapore is stepping up efforts to study the potential deployment of nuclear power in the country and take further steps to systematically build up capabilities in this area. This was announced by Prime Minister Lawrence Wong in his recent budget speech as the city-state looks to tackle its twin challenges of climate change and energy security. The move follows national assessments that emerging nuclear technologies could be suitable for the island state, even if conventional ones are not. In the years leading to this announcement, authorities have made known that efforts to understand the technology were underway, but no decision had been made about the deployment of nuclear energy here. At the moment, nuclear power produces just under 10% of global generation and is the second largest source of low emissions electricity today after hydropower. For more insights, we're joined by Professor Claude, Guet, visiting professor at NTU's School of Physical and Mathematical Sciences. Professor Guet, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, thank you for coming on to talk about this exciting development. Let's dive straight into a question that's on many people's minds. What would you say are the most important safety considerations that need to be studied before Singapore decides to deploy the use of nuclear power, especially when it comes to small modular reactors?
Well, I think the first thing is probably to build up, a skilled workforce in order to assess all technologies, that are available, as well as the full cycle from the fuel supply to ultimate waste management. So first thing you need to get the human resources. Then you would like to have a robust legal framework, to have, an independent nuclear regulatory body. All that is important. You need to carry a very careful assessment of siting. Where will it be? If we have any SMR in Singapore, will they be underground? Will they be offshore? All this has to be assessed very thoroughly.
All right. Well, Singapore currently relies on natural gas for about 95% of its electricity generation. So what would you say are the key challenges of introducing nuclear energy into a country's energy mix like Singapore's?
That's probably, the advantages. One of the main advantages of having SMR, by definition, they are small and they are modular, which means that you can add modules one after each other as your experience, is growing. So in Singapore, the installed electric power generation capacity is about 13,000 megawatts. SMR is 300 megawatts. So, if you start, for instance, which is already quite ambitious, with 3 SMRs, you would have something like maybe 7% of the installed capacity. So, I think this could be very, smooth progress and not, the Singapore grid here in Singapore is very robust, it's modern. So, I think this has to be assessed, but this should be no problem, to introduce nuclear into the grid, even if, as you say, there is 95% of gas producing electricity.
All right. Nuclear reactors, they don't produce carbon dioxide while operating, unlike fossil fuel-fired power plants. But that being said, the processes for mining and refining uranium ore and making reactor fuel all require pretty large amounts of energy. So against that backdrop, how would you assess the long-term sustainability of nuclear power?
Okay, so this is a very important question. You're right. Nuclear reactors, when operating, they do not emit any greenhouse gas. They don't just release water steam. That's what you see. That's the white cloud you can see, above the reactor. However, you're right to say that the overall carbon footprint is not zero, as one must consider carbon emission from cradle to grave, from mining to disposing the final waste. There have been, estimates of the CO2 equivalent emission. And I think, a very fair estimate has been done by IPCC, the International panel, on climate change. And what their estimate is that it's about 12 grams per kilowatt hour. So this is actually quite similar to onshore wind power. It's better. It's better than solar, energy, so photovoltaic. And of course, it's far better than gas. Gas emits about 500 grams per kilowatt hour compared to 12 grams per kilowatt hour for nuclear. So there is no zero footprint, but it's a very low carbon footprint.
All right. And what about affordability? How affordable is nuclear power at this time compared with other energy sources like hydropower and solar?
Yes, that's also a very important question. Nuclear fission reactors, they rely on uranium, natural resources. And as any mineral, uranium is finite on Earth. So we can say, this has been some estimate that with the present world fleet, conventional resources means resources you can access, say, at a cost less 200 Singapore dollar per kilogram. So with the present world fleet, conventional resource will be exhausted by less than 200 years. So in that sense, it's not sustainable. But two things. The first one is you can extract uranium from non-conventional sources like phosphate or seawater. Of course, it will be much more expensive and challenging. But actually, with seawater, it would become sustainable, really fully sustainable. But more important, to my opinion, is to shift to new technologies that have proven feasible. Let me clarify. Present technologies, they use less than 1% of the natural uranium content. I don't go into the detail. But when you take, 1 kilogram of uranium, you don't use more than, in fact, even less than 10 grams. Future technologies, and as I've said, they have proven feasible. And in fact, some of them have been on the grid. They will allow you to use more than 80%. So then it will not be a matter of 200 years, but a matter of 10,000 years or more. And then, nuclear technology would be sustainable with this next generation of reactors. So there is a present generation of reactors, limited sustainability. Future reactor, future technology, then you would have, very long-term availability.
Yeah, thanks for painting that picture for us. And now, Singapore obviously has a pretty limited land availability and, given its geological conditions, unlikely to be able to dispose of nuclear waste within its borders. How important do you think regional cooperation is for Singapore to ensure a stable and sustainable energy supply? And what role could nuclear power play in fostering collaboration across Southeast Asia? So, in fact, Singapore would be a newcomer. And in Southeast Asia, there are also some newcomers. Some have more experience, but, we have Indonesia. So, I think working together would be, of course, have a big benefit. The way I can see, if I'm allowed to take such a position, is that, Singapore could actually act could be a hub for capacity building. Singapore has top universities. It has a strong safety culture. Safety culture is essential, for nuclear. Long experience with high quality management. So networking, the Southeast Asia for education, for training, not only nuclear energy and engineering. That's what I would like to insist on. Because, all these skills you have to build, they are very broad. They don't cover only your nuclear engineering, but they go, to all you can think, which are important for safety, for security, for waste management, for, fuel processing and all that. So, yes,
networking with in the region was very profitable.
All right, Singapore stepping up efforts to study the potential deployment of nuclear power in the country, as announced by Prime Minister Lawrence Wong in his recent budget speech. And we've been talking all about it with Professor Claude Guet, visiting professor at NTU School of Physical and Mathematical Sciences. Professor Guet, thank you so much for your time.
Sure, thank you.
Yep, have a good day. Have a good day. Stay with Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.